Homeless girl rescues a dog in the rain. The next day, a millionaire knocked on her door. Before we begin, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this emotional story. The night was merciless. Rain hammered the streets like 1,000 tiny fists, turning gutters into rivers and shadows into cold reminders of loneliness. Beneath a flickering streetlight, a dog trembled. Its fur soaked, its whimpers swallowed by thunder. From across the street, a young woman in a torn gray jacket stopped mid-step. Her name was Mia Carter. 22, drenched to the bone, and invisible to a world that no longer cared she existed. But when she saw that helpless creature shivering in the dark, she didn't hesitate. She stepped into the storm. Her shoes, soaked long ago, made soft splashes as she knelt beside the dog. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, whispering, "Hey, it's okay. I've got you." For a second, lightning illuminated her face. Young, pale from hunger, yet soft with compassion. The dog whimpered once more and laid its head against her hand, trusting her instantly, as if it knew she'd been broken too. Then headlights. A sleek black car rolled to a stop a few yards away. The tinted window lowered slightly, just enough for someone inside to see the girl cradling the wounded animal. The engine idled, humming through the downpour. But before Mia could look up, the car pulled away into the darkness. She was left standing there, holding the shivering dog close to her chest, rain dripping from her eyelashes, unaware that the person who'd just driven off would soon change her life forever. Pause for breath. Have you ever wondered how one small act of kindness can alter the course of destiny? Stay with me, because this story proves that sometimes the people who have nothing end up giving the most. And if stories of compassion, fate, and second chances move your heart, make sure to subscribe to Rich Tide's channel for more tales that remind us there's still good in this world. Mia Carter had been homeless for 6 long months. 6 months of waking up to cold concrete, stale air, and the sound of other people's lives rushing past her. Once, she'd been a veterinary assistant. Steady job, tiny apartment, simple dreams. Then the clinic shut down, and one misfortune folded into another until all she had left was a backpack, an old journal, and the stubborn will to keep moving. She refused to beg. Instead, she found work wherever she could, wiping tables behind Mrs. Green's diner, washing dishes in exchange for warm leftovers, and sleeping in a forgotten shed behind the building. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Her journal was her sanctuary. Inside, written in neat, faded ink, were memories of her mother, soft lessons about kindness, compassion, and hope. Every night, before closing her tired eyes, Mia would whisper the same line her mother once told her. "No act of love, no matter how small, is ever wasted." That night, rescuing the trembling dog felt like proof that those words still meant something. She named him Buddy. He was thin, limping, and scared of thunder, but he wagged his tail every time she spoke. She shared her bread crusts with him, wrapped him in her jacket, and used torn pieces of fabric to clean his wounds. "Don't worry, Buddy," she whispered, her voice fragile but steady. "I'll take care of you, somehow." While Mia fought the cold with a rescued stray, across town sat Ethan Blake, a man the world would call lucky. 34, founder of a successful tech company, and owner of the grandest home in Willow Creek. Yet for all his wealth, Ethan lived like a ghost. Since losing his wife 2 years ago, his mansion had turned into a museum of silence. His heart, locked away behind the same kind of tinted glass that now hid his face from the girl in the rain. He didn't know her name. He didn't know why he couldn't look away when he saw her kneeling beside that dog. All he knew was that something about her, soaked, fragile, yet full of warmth, stirred something in him he thought had died with his wife. Back at the diner, Mrs. Green, a gentle woman with silver hair and the patience of a saint, noticed the change in Mia. There was a light in the girl's eyes again. Purpose. The old woman didn't ask questions. She simply slid an extra slice of pie across the counter. "Don't let the rain drown your kindness, sweetheart," she said softly. Mia smiled, holding Buddy close under her worn coat. For the first time in months, she felt needed. And somewhere, miles away in his empty mansion, Ethan Blake stared out his window as the rain kept falling, replaying the image of that girl holding a dog in the storm. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he would see her again. So tell me, would you have stopped in that storm to help a helpless animal, even when you had nothing left to give? Because for Mia Carter, that one decision would soon rewrite everything she thought she'd lost, including love, home, and hope. Mia spent the night in the shed behind the diner, the only place that still felt like hers. The walls creaked when the wind pressed against them, and the floor smelled of old wood and damp earth. In the corner, a candle flickered weakly as she bent over the little dog. Buddy whimpered, his paw swollen and crusted with dirt. Mia tore a strip from her shirt and dipped it into a cup of rainwater she had gathered outside. Her fingers were numb, but her touch stayed gentle. She cleaned the wound carefully, whispering, "Don't you worry, boy. Maybe saving you means something good will finally happen." The dog licked her hand as if to promise he believed her. For a moment, she smiled, small, tired, but real. When morning came, the rain had stopped, but the chill hadn't. Mia wrapped Buddy in her jacket and walked toward the little grocery store at the end of the street. She counted the coins she'd saved, barely enough for a loaf of bread and a can of soup. It wasn't much, but it was something. Inside the store, warm air greeted her with the scent of coffee and fresh fruit. She felt eyes on her before she even reached the counter. A man in a pressed shirt stared at her dirt-stained hands and the limp dog in her arms. She placed her coins down softly and said, "Can I get this, please?" The clerk smirked. "You planning to feed that mutt before you feed yourself?" Her face flushed, and she lowered her gaze. "He's hungry too," she murmured. The man's tone sharpened. "Look, lady, you can't come in here dripping like that. We've got customers to think about." Mia gathered her coins without a word. The whispering started before she reached the door, little daggers disguised as laughter. Outside, she blinked hard against the cold air, forcing back the tears that threatened to spill. Buddy limped beside her, tail low, eyes filled with the same quiet hurt. What she didn't see was the man standing across the street, Ethan Blake, watching everything. His black coat blended with the shadows, but his eyes didn't move from her. He'd been haunted by that image from the night before, the girl in the rain cradling his lost dog. Seeing her now, rejected and humiliated, stirred something deep inside him that money had never touched. He stayed there, unmoving, as she disappeared around the corner, until the sound of her footsteps faded into the morning hum of traffic. Later that day, Ethan found himself drawn to Mrs. Green's diner. It wasn't a place he ever visited before, but somehow it felt right. The smell of coffee, the sound of plates clinking. It reminded him of when life had been simple. He sat quietly at the counter, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee, listening. Two waitresses chatted near the kitchen door. "She's got such a kind heart," one said softly. "That homeless girl with the dog. Poor thing was soaking wet, but she still stopped to save him." Mrs. Green sighed. "Mia Carter," she said. "That girl's been through too much for someone her age. Sleeps out back sometimes. Won't take a dime she hasn't earned." Ethan looked up. The name hit him like a memory he didn't have. "Mia," he repeated under his breath. He turned to Mrs. Green. "Do you know where she stays?" The old woman studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly, measuring the man before her. There was no judgment in his face, no arrogance, just quiet concern. She hesitated, then said gently, "She keeps to herself, sir, somewhere nearby." "Why do you ask?" Ethan paused for a moment, staring into his untouched coffee. "Because someone should tell her she did something good." That night, the rain returned. It always did. Mia sat in her shed, the candle burning low. Buddy's breathing was softer now, steadier. She stroked his head and whispered, "At least you don't care what I look like." Outside, thunder rolled again, but inside, she felt a strange calm. Somewhere out there, someone had seen her. She didn't know it yet, but her life was already shifting. In a world that had only shown her cold shoulders and locked doors, one small act of kindness had begun to unlock something much larger. And though she couldn't see it, a stranger was already tracing her footsteps through the rain, ready to change everything she thought she knew about love, hope, and home. That night, the town slept beneath a thin veil of fog, but Ethan Blake couldn't rest. The image of that girl, the one who held his dog in the rain, had replayed in his mind for days. He tried to bury it in work, in silence, in the glow of his computer screen, but her eyes kept returning to him. Tired, kind, unbroken. He got in his car and drove with no plan, only instinct guiding him through the winding streets. The wipers beat rhythm against the drizzle, and every turn pulled him closer to something he couldn't quite name. Then, in the narrow alley behind Mrs. Green's diner, his headlights caught her. Mia sat on the damp concrete, back against the shed, the dog tucked under her arm for warmth. She tore the last piece of a stale sandwich in half, gave the bigger portion to Buddy, and smiled faintly as he licked her fingers. Ethan stopped the car and watched for a moment, a lump forming in his throat. It wasn't pity he felt. It was awe. Here was someone with nothing, still giving everything she had. He stepped out, opened his umbrella, and walked slowly toward her. The rain whispered between them as he said softly, "Mind if I join you?" Mia looked up, startled. Her eyes darted to the sleek car parked nearby, then back to the stranger standing in front of her. Her voice was small but firm. "I don't take charity." Ethan smiled, gentle and unoffended. "Then let's call it dinner between friends." For a moment, she hesitated, studying his face. The calm eyes, the sincerity that didn't feel like pity. Finally, she nodded. "Suit yourself." He crouched beside her, holding the umbrella so it covered them both. The silence was thick but not uncomfortable. Buddy rested his head on Mia's lap, tail tapping lightly against the ground. After a while, Ethan asked quietly, "You always look after strays?" She shrugged, eyes on the dog. "Used to be my job. I worked at a vet clinic before it shut down. Guess I never learned how to stop caring." He tilted his head, studying her profile in the dim light. "You were a vet assistant?" "Yeah," she said. "Didn't pay much, but it made sense. Animals don't judge. They don't ask where you're from or what you've lost." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. The grief that had kept him silent for years loosened slightly. He hadn't spoken about his wife in so long, hadn't dared to feel anything at all. But here was this young woman, drenched, exhausted, and still talking about compassion like it was air she couldn't live without. "You know," he said, voice barely above the rain, "most people would have walked past that dog." Mia smiled sadly. "Most people already walk past me." That line hit him harder than she could imagine. They sat there, sharing what was left of the sandwich. No grand gestures, no speeches, just the sound of rain and two souls trying to stay warm under the same fragile umbrella. When the drizzle began to fade, Ethan stood. "I should get going." He hesitated, then added, "What's your name?" "Mia," she said quietly. He repeated it almost to himself. "Mia Carter." He let the name linger like a note of music. "You've got more courage than most people I know." Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had spoken to her like that in months, without judgment, without pity. Ethan nodded once, offered a small smile, and walked back to his car. The engine hummed softly as he drove off into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the faint warmth of kindness. Mia sat still, listening to the rain tap against the roof of the shed. For the first time in a long while, she felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of hope. She looked down at Buddy, who gazed up with trusting eyes, and whispered, "I think we just met someone special." In that quiet alley, beneath the fading drizzle, a spark had been lit. One that would soon blaze into a change neither of them saw coming. The morning came quietly, with a pale sun struggling through thin clouds. For once, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried its chill. Mia stirred from sleep to the sound of knocking, sharp, heavy, and out of place. She sat up quickly, heart racing. No one ever knocked for her. The sound came again, louder this time. She hurried to the diner's back door, brushing dust from her sleeves. When she opened it, two men in dark suits stood there, clean, polished, and serious. They looked so out of place against the peeling paint and old bricks that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. One of them spoke in a calm, firm tone. "Are you Mia Carter?" Her mouth went dry. "Who's asking?" The taller man didn't answer the question. He reached into his coat and handed her a folded piece of paper. "We were asked to give you this." Mia hesitated before taking it, half expecting a bill or a warning. The paper was thick, expensive. Across the front, in neat handwriting, it read, "Meet me at 16 Willow Lane. Bring the dog." She looked up, but the men were already walking away. The world around her felt suddenly smaller, quieter. Her stomach knotted. Who knew her name? Who sent this? Was she in trouble? She turned to Buddy, who wagged his tail as if it were all perfectly normal. "What do you think, boy?" she whispered. "Should we go?" The dog barked once, softly but sure, and that was all the answer she needed. She tucked the note into her pocket, wrapped Buddy in her jacket, and started walking. The air bit at her fingers, and every step felt heavier than the last. Miles passed beneath her worn shoes, quiet streets, the smell of morning coffee drifting from open windows, the sting of cold wind against her face. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. When she finally reached the end of Willow Lane, she stopped in her tracks. Before her stood a house unlike anything she'd ever seen. Tall iron gates framed a winding driveway that disappeared into a sea of green. Beyond it, a mansion rose like something from another world. Clean lines, glass walls that caught the light, a silent kind of wealth that spoke without words. She swallowed hard. "We've got the wrong place," she murmured to Buddy. "No one like me belongs here." She turned to leave, but Buddy tugged at his makeshift leash and slipped free. With a joyful bark, he darted through the half-open gate, racing toward the house. "Buddy!" she shouted, panic flooding her chest. She ran after him, her voice breaking. "Come back!" The dog didn't listen. He sprinted across the drive, tail wagging furiously. Before Mia could catch him, the front door opened. And there, standing in the doorway, was Ethan Blake. He looked different in the daylight. Less like a stranger, more like someone she'd known all her life without realizing it. A faint smile touched his lips. "You left before I could thank you properly." Mia froze, breathless. Her eyes darted from him to the sprawling estate behind him, and then back again. "You live here?" she asked, her voice small. "I do," he said quietly. "And it seems my dog's been in better hands than I thought." "Your dog?" she repeated. Ethan nodded, stepping closer. Buddy was already at his feet, tail sweeping the marble floor, eyes bright with recognition. "He went missing 3 days ago," Ethan continued, his voice soft but edged with emotion. "I searched everywhere. He was all I had left of my wife." Mia blinked, struggling to take it in. The memory of that rainy night returned. The cold, the trembling dog, the black car that had slowed nearby. It was him. He had seen her then. Ethan looked down, his voice breaking slightly. "When she died, I told myself I wouldn't care about anything again. But losing him felt like losing her twice." Mia's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she just whispered, "I'm glad I found him." He met her eyes, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Two people standing in the same silence, carrying different kinds of pain that somehow understood each other. Ethan smiled, faint but genuine. "You didn't just find him, Mia. You saved him. And in a way, you saved me too." Mia blinked hard, fighting the tears that suddenly burned her eyes. She looked down at Buddy, who wagged his tail between them, the unlikely bridge that had pulled their worlds together. Ethan gestured toward the open door. "Come in. You both look like you could use something warm." Mia hesitated at the threshold, staring into the warmth spilling from the grand hall. She had spent months outside every door the world had closed on her. But this one had opened. She stepped forward slowly, Buddy trotting happily at her side. And though she didn't know it yet, that single step would lead her not just into Ethan's home, but into the kind of life she'd stopped believing she could ever have. The girl who once shared her last sandwich with a stray dog was about to learn that kindness, even in the darkest storm, never goes unseen. Mia stepped cautiously into the grand house, her shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. Everything around her gleamed warm lights, tall windows, the faint scent of cinnamon and rain. She stood there awkwardly, clutching Buddy in her arms, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid she didn't belong. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You can relax, Mia. You're safe here." He smiled gently. "Let me get you something warm to eat." She shook her head at first. "I can't really, I should go." But the smell of food, real food, filled the air, and the exhaustion in her body made her sway slightly. Ethan noticed. "Just one meal," he said softly. "Not charity. A thank you." That word, thank you, melted her resistance. Minutes later, she found herself sitting at a long oak table, her hair still damp from the shower Ethan had insisted she take. Clean clothes rested against her skin, soft, unfamiliar, borrowed but comforting. Buddy lay at her feet, full and content for the first time in days. Ethan sat across from her, watching her quietly. There was no pity in his eyes, only quiet admiration. Finally, he spoke. "You saved something I thought I'd lost forever," he said, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "And I'd like to return the favor." Mia looked up from her plate, unsure she'd heard right. "I don't understand." He leaned forward slightly. "I run a foundation, an animal rescue center. It started after my wife passed. She loved animals. It was her dream to save as many as we could. But after she was gone, I lost the heart for it. You reminded me why we started." She blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan continued, his tone warm and sincere. "I want you to work with me, Mia. Help me run the center. You've already proven you've got more compassion than anyone I've met in years." Her fork trembled in her hand. "Me? Work for you?" He nodded. "You saved Buddy. You cared when you had nothing. That's the kind of heart I need at the foundation." Her throat tightened. "I'm not sure I deserve this." Ethan's eyes softened. "You do. You remind me what hope looks like." The words broke through her composure. Tears welled in her eyes, sliding down her cheeks faster than she could stop them. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said gently. "It's been a long time since either of us had something to cry happy tears about." For the first time, she smiled fully, unhiding, unguarded. Days turned into weeks, and Mia's life began to change in ways she never imagined. At the Animal Rescue Center, she moved with a quiet confidence that had long been buried. She fed the dogs, tended to the wounded cats, and taught volunteers how to comfort the frightened and abandoned. Buddy followed her everywhere, his tail wagging like a heartbeat beside her. Ethan visited the center often, watching from a distance as she worked. Her laughter filled the air, the same sound that had been missing from his home for years. He found himself smiling again. Real smiles, not the polite ones he'd worn for the world. Every time she looked at him, it felt like sunlight through fog. Sometimes they'd talk after hours, sitting on the porch as the sun went down. He told her stories about his wife, their dreams, their failures, their love. Mia listened, her empathy quiet but steady. In turn, she told him about her mother, about the journal she carried everywhere, about how kindness was the only thing that had ever kept her alive. Their conversations stretched easily into the night. What began as gratitude turned into friendship, and friendship slowly grew into something neither dared name. There was no grand confession, no dramatic moment, just an unspoken truth that sat gently between them, like a flame that needed no tending. And through it all, Buddy remained the bridge between their worlds. Whenever they drifted into silence, he would nudge Ethan's hand or rest his head on Mia's knee, reminding them both that love, any kind of love, was always worth saving. In those days, the mansion no longer felt empty. The echo of footsteps had been replaced with laughter. The once quiet rescue center pulsed with life. And for Mia, who had spent so long walking through storms, every sunrise felt like proof that even the most broken hearts could find their way back to warmth. The millionaire who had once watched her from a car window didn't rescue her. He simply gave her a place to stand, a chance to be seen. And in return, she gave him what he thought he'd never have again: hope. A year had passed since the night the rain brought two broken souls together. The seasons had turned, the storms had softened, and the world around them felt gentler now, as if it, too, had decided to heal. The rescue center stood alive with sound and color. Dogs barked playfully in the yard, cats napped under warm sunlight, and volunteers laughed as they worked. At the heart of it all stood Mia Carter, clipboard in hand, smile steady and sure. She moved with quiet confidence, the kind that only comes when someone has found their purpose. The girl who once had nothing now ran an entire foundation, one that bore her name. Ethan Blake walked beside her through the kennels, his steps unhurried, his expression calm. Buddy trotted happily ahead of them, tail wagging like a metronome of joy. Ethan stopped to watch Mia comfort a trembling puppy. His voice was soft when he spoke. "You know, Mia, you gave me back more than a dog. You gave me my life back." She turned to him, eyes warm and shining. "And you gave me something I didn't know I could have," she said. "A home." They stood there for a moment, smiling at each other. Not with the thrill of new beginnings, but with the peace of people who had survived the storm together. Later that evening, when the last of the volunteers had gone, Mia sat by the office window with her old, worn journal, the same one that had carried her through every lonely night. She flipped to the final page and picked up her pen. Her handwriting, once shaky and uncertain, was now steady and full of life. She wrote, "Sometimes the rain doesn't wash you away. It leads you home." Outside, Buddy barked softly at the setting sun. The golden light stretched across the field, touching every kennel, every life they had saved. As the sky darkened into dusk, the camera of memory would fade over the sign at the front gate. The Carter Blake Animal Foundation, because kindness changes everything. The woman who once walked through storms had built a place where no one would ever be left out in the rain again. Because kindness had found its way back to her, and through her to the world. If stories like this touch your heart and remind you that hope still exists, subscribe to Rich Tides for more true and inspiring tales that warm the soul and heal the spirit. And tell me, do you believe that one small act of kindness can change a life forever? How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more heart-touching stories coming your way soon.